onto YouTube.
This is the first time I've seen him go late, so now I know how to.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map of meaning. Forgive me for being a couple of minutes late. We were chatting behind the scenes, and the time just ticks by. But we're glad to be here now, and let's just jump right in and see how Rabbi Schwartz is doing. Shalom, Rabbi Schwartz. We're going to turn the class over to you, and if you got to go a couple of minutes later than usual, then yeah, so be it.
See where we wind up on the subject matter. Everybody, hello, and thank you, Dan. And I'm going to share the screen back to the text that we've been. Oops, that's not the text. Where is it? Where's the text? I want. This is it. Is it on the page? Is it on? Okay. So, last time we left off. See the ZD? That's where we left off. That's my marker. So we'll erase it. We were in the middle. Now, we were in the middle of Rambam's fifth paragraph. We did all the Talmud that it was based on, and now we're up to the Shulchan Aruch, with Rabbi Yosef Karo, which came after Rambam, his version, his iteration of it. So it'll be a review. There's quite a bit of material here, but this will be a review of what Rambam was saying, and then we'll get into the notes, and we'll see where that takes us. So, in 248, his chapter 248, paragraph 1, every man is obligated to give charity. Rambam said that. Even a pauper who derives his sustenance from charity is obligated to tithe from that which he has given. And whatever he says here is continued in Rambam's paragraph 10, because he goes into things that Rambam, so he changes the order. So Rambam discussed in paragraph 5 this idea, and he goes on to speak about something that Rambam is not going to discuss until he gets to his 10th paragraph. So I just split it up. But instead, he goes into his next chapter, in paragraph 1, to continue what the Rambam addressed. And he says, if he cannot give as much as needed, because everybody's obligated to give charity, and now you've got a situation in front of you, so then if he gives up to 1/5 of his assets, he has performed the mitzvah in the best possible way. If he gives 1/10, it is an average amount. That's a normal person. Less than this is shameful. The 1/5, the one shameful. In other words, we'll see that, as we saw in the Rambam, that you did the mitzvah. You can't say that you ignored it, but it's a shameful performance. Okay, the 1/5, which is the high point that is suggested, is taken from the principal in the first year, and thereafter from the yearly profit. Now that's the Shulchan Aruch. Rambam never said this. This is going to become a contentious issue. That when you say 1/5, he's talking about income of the year, 1/5 of the income, and thereafter from the yearly profit. So the first year you get assets, that's income, so it's 1/5 of whatever you got. And then after that, whatever make from whatever you had in the next year, invest it, or you do business with it, whatever. So then you'll take 1/5 of the profit. So that's how he describes income. Wealth is a totally different issue. And notice over here I said assets. That'll be your wealth. So just to make sure you understand the difference here is, let's say somebody inherits $1 million. Okay. And so everybody agrees that the year he got it, so that's income. So he would, if he wanted to perform the best, he would give 200,000 away to charity. If there's somebody that needs it, and so on. But that would be the upper limit. Next year, he just keeps the money in the bank. He's got 800,000 left. He didn't do anything with it. So next year, Shulchan Aruch would say, well, you don't have to give anything because you don't have any income. But Rambam would say, or someone who's going on his assets would say, no, you got 800,000. So now 20% of 800,000 is 160,000. So now if you want to perform the charity mitzvah to the finest extent, you can give up to 160,000. You know, if you put it to work and and he made a million. He got 20%. He made a 800. He built it back up to a million. So then that 200. So it depends on what he did with it. Okay. Now Ramah says on this, and this is Rabbi Moshe. He's writing for the Ashkenazi community, the northern community in Europe, France, Germany, Russia. And one should not deplete himself for more than a fifth, so that he does not become needy himself. However, this applies only during normal times. When one is near death, he may donate as much as he wishes, because he doesn't have to worry about becoming impoverished. He's going to die soon, so he wants to leave a nice name behind himself, I guess. Furthermore, one should not use his charity funds to perform other mitzvahs. Now, he's not talking about a guy on death. He's saying just normally, you should not use your charity funds to perform other mitzvahs, such as candles for the synagogue or the like, but should only give them to the poor. So the synagogue, that's a public need. You have a synagogue, and in those days, it was you had to put fuel, you had to buy fuel and for the candles and a lot of light, etc. So it was an expense. In some large institutions, the electricity is quite a bill every month, as they have a lot of lights and it adds up. So that's but is it charity? It's for the public need. Is the public considered a charity case or not? So here, Ramah is saying no, it's not, and you should keep your charity funds. I mean, you can give a donation. You can I have to be careful what I say, because in today's parlance, if you get a donation receipt, it's charity. Oh, but it could be you gave money to the Red Cross. Now that's for you. That's for you. You'll have a blood transfusion if you ever need it, but you get a charitable receipt and you can deduct it from your taxes. So we think in different ways. But the Torah is saying that this is for the poor people, not for everybody. There's poor people, and this we're talking about charity for the poor. So sure, support, buy candles for the synagogue if you've got enough money, but don't take your charity funds for that. That's what's going on here. Okay, and now back to the Shulchan Aruch. A person should never restrain himself to less than 1/3 of a shekel in a year, because if he gives less than this, he has not fulfilled the commandment of charity, which is what Rambam said. So it's a repeat. So that's repetition. Now we go to the notes. In this paragraph, so I'm going back to Rambam, and I have to show you if it's not clear. In this paragraph, M defines the phrase ample means that he used in paragraph 1. Remember, in paragraph 1, I said he introduced 3 ideas: the idea of a pauper, the idea of charity, and the idea of ample means. Here he's going to the ample means. That's clear. If you have ample means, so you can give up to how much? Well, 20% of that. The donor must have at least 5 times the amount required. The Talmud explains that the limit of 1/5 is learned from the verse, "I will surely tithe all that you give me." This is I forgot to put in this is a verse in Genesis. I'll have to look it up. It's a verse in Genesis, and you know where it is. It's when the story of Yaakov, the third forefather, when after he stole the blessing. Remember, he dressed up. His mother dressed him up to resemble his other brother, his twin brother, and stole the blessing that Yitzchak, Isaac, wanted to give him. And then Esau became quite angry about that, and expressed the desire he was going to kill his brother. So they arranged for him to go away. And he was traveling, went to a strange land, back to his ancestral land where he met his wives, but he's on the road now, and he has a dream, and there's a ladder, and he dreams of angels going up and down on the ladder, and he realizes he's been sleeping in a holy place and so on. And when he wakes up the next morning from that dream, so he's very inspired by the vision he had. And one of the things he says is that if you're going to look after me, and keep me whole, then I will surely tithe all that you give me. And now, surely tithe, that's the English translation. The Hebrew is a double expression of tithing. It's the expression of tithing is maser, aser, maser, you just repeat it twice, and it means like for sure, or it means something, but it's a doubling down of the expression. So since the Hebrew word, so I'll continue now, since the Hebrew word for tithe may also be translated as 1/10, because that's literally what it comes from. It's the word 1/10. So the double expression in the verse has been taken to mean 2/10 or 1/5. In this way, it has been inferred that the act of tithing can extend to as much as 1/5 of one's possessions, but that the normal range of tithing is 1/10, because that's the word as defined by the normal meaning of the word. Okay, so that's where they get it from. So it's all scripturally oriented. Note that the performance of the positive mitzvah is measured not only by the amount, but by time. A minimum of 1/3 of a shekel, which is small, must be given within the period of each year. The proportion of 1/5 to 1/10 is also measured over the period of 1 year. So every year, you're starting over again. So if you gave like 20% that year, so that year you were great with your charity, fine, great. Next year you'll find you're able to, or the poor don't present themselves, or you're just feeling more miserly, whatever it is. So it's a new accounting, and that year maybe you'll give 1/10 or somewhere in between or something less, whatever. It is also interesting to note that while average and superior performance, average being 1/10, superior being up to 1/5, is measured in relation to income, 1/5 and 1/10 respectively, the minimum performance is measured by a fixed amount of 1/3 of a shekel. Nothing to do with how much you earn. There's a minimum, no matter who you are, no matter what you got, 1/3 of a shekel is the minimum, even for a poor person. This fixed amount seems to apply to all, even a pauper himself. Now you may, and it's a small amount, so even a pauper can be able to do it. And when I was a student, whenever I read this, and I think back to the time when I was a student in Israel. I went to Israel for 5 months before I was married. Met my wife there, and there's paupers in Jerusalem. There's paupers all around. Many European cities there are, and you can always state there's some guys you wonder if they really need it, but there's some guys you don't mind giving to them at all, because you notice that they quietly on their own, they will take a coin out of their cup and give it to another guy, and that always speaks highly of the guy. Anyways, so he says now M states that one may tithe up to 1/5 of his wealth. If this is taken literally, a person could totally deplete his wealth in the scant period of 5 years. Actually, it goes on a little longer because it's from the balance, but it won't take long to deplete your wealth if it's from your assets. Like I said, if the guy inherited $1 million, gave away 200,000, the next year 160, and so on, so you can see how that's going to quickly come down to a lot less than you started with. Shulchan Aruch states the more likely view that the tithe may only be taken from newly acquired capital. That's income. It is very tempting to presume that this is what was meant by Maimonides, Rambo, because that's how we think. We all think in terms of annual taxes and annual income and so on. However, it must be acknowledged that M's choice of words do not clearly support this view. It does seem to be speaking about assets. So I want to discuss this. A careful reading of the Ketubot source, that's the Talmud, the Gemara, reveals that in addition to the scriptural basis for the range of the tithe, the Talmud also offers a practical reason, namely to prevent an overzealous donor from impoverishing himself. Why does the Talmud offer this practical explanation when a more authoritative scriptural basis is available, unless the scriptural basis is not accepted by all? Those that base the 1/5 limit on the scriptural text would apply the limit to income, since Maser traditionally refers to income. Nowhere is it suggested that Maser, which is the Hebrew word for the tithing, must be given on the land itself. You always talk about you tithe the produce of the land, not the land itself. You don't give away the land, you give away the produce land. That's income. Shulchan Aruch would definitely fall in this camp. He said income. Those that reject the scriptural basis and say it has nothing to do with the verse, it's a practical reason not to impoverish yourself, are forced to supply a practical reason. If it applies only to income, the limit is not necessary, since the capital base will remain intact. If I'm only talking about income, so I still got my $1 million. So if I didn't, earn anything from it, I don't give anything. If I earn 200,000, so I'll give 20,000 or 40,000, whatever. But I still got my $1 million. Therefore, they assert that the 1/5 limit applies to the entire capital base. M seems to fall into this camp. So a huge difference. And I maintain that we generally behave according to Shulchan Aruch, the latter opinion, that it's on income. But I find it very interesting that there may be a very authoritative view that it's on assets. Okay, so that takes us to, I just want to take you back to the Talmud in Ksuas. Yeah, here he's a scripture. And this guy says, Rabbi said, don't spend more than a fifth, because otherwise you'll impoverish yourself. And the other guy said, well, I got a scriptural thing there. So it doesn't sound like that. Maybe they're not arguing, they're just talking. But I think they're actually arguing. What's the source of this rule? Whether it's the practical consideration in Usha, and that would be that they just dictate. It's not even from the Torah. It's from the rabbi said, hey, I know you guys are very generous, but we can't allow you to impoverish yourself. That's not going to work. So they made a practical rule, whereas others say, no, this is from the Torah. The Torah says this is the max. Okay. So now we're going on to Rambam, paragraph 6. If a pauper with whom we are not familiar says, I am hungry, feed me. So it comes to us, to an individual, to the community. We do not investigate whether he is a charlatan, but rather we offer him sustenance immediately. If, however, he appears before us naked, in other words, he hasn't got good clothes, or he's just dressed in rags, and says, clothe me, then we do investigate whether or not he is a charlatan. But if he is known to us, then we clothe him immediately, according to his prestige, without any investigation. So we know the guy, we know he used to dress like so and so, so we would try to replenish that if we can. But if we don't know him, we're entitled to, or we'll see whether it's an entitlement, but we can investigate. So now we go to the Talmud. This is Bava Basra, which is again in torts. This is a section going with torts, page 9a. Rav Huna said, applicants for food. Now you gotta kind of pay attention. This gets a little complicated. Rav Huna said, applicants for food are examined, but not applicants for clothes. This was the opposite of what Rambam said. This rule can be based, if you like, on scripture, or if you prefer, on common sense. It can be based on common sense because the one who has no clothing is exposed to contempt, but not the other. He's just hungry. It's not contempt. That to him is much worse. Or if you prefer on scripture, from the verse, there's a verse in Isaiah, is it not to share your bread with the hungry? They quote. The word share is spelled in such a way as if to say, examine and then give to him. In the Hebrew word used can also be translated this way. So you examine first and then give to him. That's with the hungry. Whereas later in the same verse it is written, when thou seest the naked, that thou cover him. That is to say, immediately. So he says, you see it from the verse itself, because just the way it's worded, it's implying that you can investigate about the hunger, but not about the nakedness. Okay, that's Rabbi Huna. Rabbi Judah said, however, that applicants for clothes are to be examined, but not applicants for food. This rule can be based, if you like, on common sense, or if you prefer, on scripture. If you like, on common sense, because the one without food is actually suffering, but not the other. You're hungry. You're in pain. You may be embarrassed if you're naked, but you're not in pain. You're not in physical pain. So to him, he's more concerned with the physical pain than the emotional distress. Or if you prefer on scripture, because it says Is it not to share your bread with the hungry? This is the same verse the other guy was quoting. But he looks at it and says, that is at once. It means share your bread right away. Whereas later it is written, when you see the naked, that is to say, when you shall have seen that he is deserving. It has been taught, he infers that it means it infers an examination. You'll see that, you'll look into it, you'll see he's deserving, okay, we'll give him clothes. So now I think I should just say, make a new line here. It has been taught in agreement with Judah, Rabbi Judah. If a man says, clothe me, he's examined, but if he says, feed me, he's not examined. So they had this argument. Rabbi Hannah said, first of all, they have a verse. So they're both worried about the verse, and they both have their own common sense approach. So one guy says it's the hunger that should be dealt with. The first guy says, the hungry you can examine, but the clothing, you see, he's naked, cover him right away. And the other guy says, no, the reverse. The guy's in pain, he's hungry, so give him the food right away. Emotional, okay, so look into it. If he's deserving, give it to him. And then they say, well, we have a teaching. And the teaching agrees with the second guy. So that's what Rambam brought down, because the Talmud decided to present both opinions, but then it said at the end that we have a teaching, and that's the way it goes. So that's the Talmud. Okay, now we go to the Shulchan Aruch, 251:7. The obligation is first to feed the hungry before clothing the poor. So he makes it even a different sort of thing. It's not whether he's taking from this discussion another thing. Let's say the community has people that are hungry and the people that need clothing, people need shelter. What do you do first? Whose needs do you provide first? He said first the food. First you give them the food, and then you look after whatever else they need. But if you've got people hungry, you give all your money first to the food, and then if you got enough left over, you worry about the next stage. That's his take. Number 251:10. For one who applies for food, we do not investigate whether he's a charlatan, but we feed him immediately. For one who's naked and applies for clothing, we do investigate whether he's a charlatan. However, we are familiar with him, we clothe immediately. That's pretty well exactly what Rambam said. But he did include something that the Rambam didn't really address. And that is, what if you have a lot of people and they're hungry and they're starving and they're cold and they're in shelter and like all kinds of needs, as you get in refugee statuses in the refugee camps and so on like that. This is a real issue. People have to deal with it. What do we do? So here's the rule. First, they'll give them food. Okay. I go to my notes. Here, for the first time, and this may not come out in English, but it's in the Hebrew. Here, for the first time, M uses the plural rather than the singular when referring to the donor. With few exceptions, M continues to use the plural person for the remainder of the chapter. This may indicate a shift of emphasis from the duties on individuals to the duties on the community. Nevertheless, the cases quoted often seem equally applicable to the private individual. Therefore, M's references to the community perhaps should be understood as simply mirroring the normal context of the situation. For example, here it might be supposed that only the community normally has the resources to conduct an investigation to determine a person's true financial status. I don't got time. If somebody comes to me, I don't got time to go hire an investigator to go examine, whether the guy's, really legitimate or not. So now I can tell you, for example, many communities, Jewish communities, we get a lot of people. They come, especially from Israel. They come from other places, and they go around. And, there's very generous people, and people go knocking on their doors, or they accost them in the synagogues when they come for the prayers. So we have an organization in town where these people go first, and they get a certificate that they've been investigated and that they're legit. And the people investigate them do it by phoning up. You're coming from which city? They'll phone up. They'll speak to a rabbi they know there, and confirm that this guy he had a reversal of his situation. He got sick. His wife got sick. Whatever. Whatever it is, he lost his job. all kinds of tragedies happen, and then they give them a certificate. Now some people are prepared to help them out when they see that it's been investigated. And so you need a community to do that. Then everybody's, it doesn't make sense for everybody to have to go investigate the guy themselves. So that may explain why M switched to the plural, but that in the beginning he was serious about the individual. Okay, so now another question. Is it our duty to conduct an investigation to ensure we're not wasting our charity funds, or merely our right? Right? We're talking about a guy comes. Do I have a right to investigate, or maybe a duty, because I can't waste my charity funds? Perhaps this question hinges on the two sources quoted in the Talmud. Both Rabbi Huna and Rabbi Judah supported their views with arguments of logic and scriptural references. If an investigation is based on common sense, then it must be optional, because common sense can only suggest an action as prudent, not command it. If, though, an investigation is based on scripture, it may be commanded. Maybe the Torah requires us to investigate before we spend the money. However, I say it is unlikely that the scriptural references are intended in this way, since each side presents the same verse in support of its view. More likely, when you get this kind of situation that everybody's quoting the same verse and saying, no, this is what it means, so then it's more likely it's each side's application of common sense that leads them to their different interpretations of the verse. And that is, the verse is an asmachta, a post to lean on in Talmudic parlance. It's not really a proof. We're just saying, look, that's the way I read the verse, because it makes more sense to me to do it this way. And the other guy says, no, it makes more sense the other way, and I can read the verse another way. In fact, both sides probably consider the investigation a right rather than an obligation, since they both forbid it in certain circumstances. They both forbid you to give the charity or to do the investigation when, depending on the circumstance, whichever one each one thinks. So the investigation will be a right rather than an obligation if they can forbid it. From Rambam, it seems even clearer that he considers an investigation to be a right rather than an obligation, since he adds that we need not conduct an investigation when we are already satisfied with our knowledge of the situation. But you never know. Maybe something's changed. So if it was an obligation to investigate before you give, so that's what you do. You investigate.
Rabbi, can I ask a question about, because we have a law here in British Columbia against aggressive panhandling.
Right. We have something, yeah.
So how do you deal with aggressive beggars?
Okay, so that's a different question. It's a different question, because first of all, I mean, we're talking. You're opening up really a whole interesting area, because if the Torah, this is God's law. If God gave us an instruction, this is the way you run your life. This is the way you create a good operating society, etc. And it's actually in a commandment instruction. And then we happen to live in a country that goes against that. That opens up a whole can of worms. That's its own conversation. What do you do now? And we have situations like that. There's certainly abortion is a case in point that's hotly contested. So there's certainly what to discuss in that area. But over here, let's say that there's we're going to see that he's going to deal with charlatans. He's going to talk about charlatans. By the same token, the guy can't, it's just a personal thing. I guess you can never stop somebody from pestering you. But you can certainly run away from him or ignore him if you don't have. Let's say you don't have, so then you can't help him. You just don't have, so you can't help him. So you have to be satisfied in your knowledge that you've done what you can, and that's it. You can't do any more. Go to somebody else. There's situations like that, and that's how people become desperately poor because there was nobody around to pick them out of the little thing that they fell into. So this is life. This is what happens. Okay, so that's the time for today. So we're at paragraph 7. I'll put my ZD here for where we pick up next time. And
Right on.
have a good day. We'll see you
So
tomorrow night.
we're good for tomorrow, Rabbi?
Yeah, why not?
All right, sounds good. So, folks, yeah, we will be back with Zoom Daily tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. If you want to participate in the Zoom, I do open it a half hour early so we can have some chit chat. You can always email Rabbi directly at sbs447@gmail.com. That's sbs447@gmail.com. If you have any questions about the material or comments about the material, he always loves to interact and meet new people. So if you want to join the Zoom meeting directly, contact him and he would be glad to send you the Zoom connection links and add you to any material emails. So until tomorrow night, have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody. Bye for now.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.